Nina HINDMARSH Last updated 1611, May 25, 2018. Victoria Westerink and Laura Manson, co-owners and directors at Matuku Funerals in East Takaka. "We speak to the deceased the whole time," says Laura Manson, sipping her sencha tea. "We treat them like a live person. We tell them what we are doing, where we're going." In a small house at a quiet East Takaka funeral home, fading afternoon autumn sun streams through the double doors of the living room to where the two women sit. Victoria Westerink nods over her coffee. "The dead are just like the living," she says. "They are total individuals and each one is so complex and so different. And that goes for everything, not just the way they died but their family and whole life situation." The longtime friends have recently opened Golden Bay's first home in at least 80 years. The women share a heartfelt intention to help families do death well. For Manson and Westerink, that means offering families choices they may never have known they had, such as natural burials or facilitating more involvement in taking care of their own dead. Victoria Westerink drives the company hearse to a funeral. Funeral director is an unusual choice of occupation, the friends both admit. It involves working with emotional and grieving families whose lives have often turned upside down in an instant. It's their job to clean, dress and lay out the dead, drive them to their final resting place. But nothing could feel more natural to them both. "I just have always wanted to be a funeral director, as crazy as that sounds," Westerink says. "I don't think we as humans do death terribly well. I think there's lots of room to do it much better. Sometimes to make changes, you have to be part of it." Both women felt the deep calling to the work after being deeply affected by their own personal experiences with dying family members and their funerals. When Westerink's parents died within a year of one another, she planned both their funerals, and both were very different. While her mother's death was slower and they knew she was going to die, her father died suddenly, leaving the family in shock. The hearse at Matuku Funerals East Takaka Bass. Westerink, a nurse for over 25 years, cared for her mother at home until her death. "Mum went from her bed, into the coffin and into the ground, and that was it," she says. Whereas Dad, his death was sudden, so he was a coroner's case. "He got taken away and I couldn't see him. It was days later, he finally came back." She suspects this was unhealthy for her own grieving process. Grief is visual, a tactile thing. To be able to see and be with a dead body helps one to start consciously accepting they're gone. Up until now, grieving families in Golden Bay have only had one option when their loved one dies, if they didn't want to do it all themselves. That was to hire funeral directors from Matuku or Nelson, and most commonly, send the deceased over the hill to be embalmed. Westerink says she saw a community need for a different type of service, that was community and family-led, one where the deceased could stay in Golden Bay. She says her work as a nurse, particularly in aged care where death is always looming near, had prepared her. "Looking after the living or the dead requires skill and compassion, and it's not really in a separate box for me," she says. "When you are in the process of looking after someone dying at work, you are looking after their families as well. It's this whole ecosystem around them." Manson, a celebrant and dairy farm owner, had a deeply empowering and positive death experience 3 years ago, when she was given the opportunity to plan and lead her grandmother's funeral in the United States. Laura Manson, a celebrant and dairy farm owner, had a deeply empowering and positive death experience 3 years ago, when she was given the opportunity to plan and lead her grandmother's funeral in the United States. It was a sharp contrast to the impersonal funerals she had attended in the past. Although Manson was deep in grief, she realized the enormous emotional value in planning a family-led service. It gave her sense of empowerment, completion and facilitated healthy grief. She says she always wanted to do social work, drawn to the idea of supporting people through critical, finite situations. Being a funeral director is both refreshing and sacred work, she says. It's refreshing because I'm such a people pleaser, but with this, you have people who are grieving, and you can't take their pain away or fix it. You can only bear it with them and try to make it slightly easier. Like a woman in labor, death is one of life's big transitions, a place between these two worlds. I just find to be able to stand there with people while they are going through grief, and just being present with them how they are, is really honoring. The pair launched Matuku Funerals during the week Cyclone Gita ripped through the region in February, causing severe slips and washouts on the Takaka Hill, cutting off Golden Bay. Since then they have held 9 funerals. They say Gita kicked them off because of the difficulty in getting over the hill, while everyone else's businesses were reeling from the impact and applying for hardships grants. They were launched into gear. While the funeral service industry has long been male-dominated, the pair say times are changing. A gender reckoning in the business of death and how it's done has been tearing down the stereotypes all around the world, in what has been traditionally a male domain. Matuku was launched during the week Cyclone Gita ripped through the region and caused severe slips and washouts to the Takaka Hill. Since then they have held 9 funerals. Long before the funeral industry developed, women were part of a forgotten history of caring for the dead, like midwives to the dead. Today, women all around the world are reclaiming the role of undertakers, often veering away from traditional-style funerals and offering families more options. The two women feel strongly that in whatever they do, the family is at the center. They offer an alternative to the traditional practice of embalming, by using refrigeration. They admit that embalming is sometimes a personal preference due to a family's spiritual beliefs, and there are times when embalming is necessary for other reasons, but for the majority of natural deaths, keeping the body very cool is safe and sufficient. Embalming was invented during the American Civil War as a way to get bodies back to loved ones without decomposing. Manson says while it's common practice in New Zealand, Australia and the United States, in many other parts of the world it's unusual. In most cases, embalming is only used in cases where a body has to be moved, such as overseas. For some, it's a brutal and invasive process, something that people don't really think about, and often they aren't given any other options. People just assume it's something that you have to do when you die. Westerink says, refrigeration works really well, and it also opens up the possibility of having a natural burial. Matuku have a large purpose-built refrigerator at the East Takaka home, and they can support families in the home with special cool packs. A natural burial is where no chemicals are used in a non-treated wood coffin, or a board wrapped in a shroud is used. Westerink says 3.3 degrees is the magic number to slow the process of decomposition. A natural burial is where no chemicals are used inside or on the body, and then they are buried in a non-treated wood coffin, or on a board wrapped in a shroud. We did a lovely funeral with a person in rototype wrapped in a shroud, and that was really special for her friends. Golden Bay resident Beryl Rogers, 91, remembers one of the last funeral services in the area may have been Old Billy Green. No one is quite sure, but the last funeral homes were thought to be still around in the 1920s and 1930s. Local historian Barry Cashman also remembers Bill Green well. He had a funeral home near the high school, and also worked as a carpenter. He had a cream and green colored car, but what he used as far as a hearse is concerned, I don't know. He says, Mom used to always laugh because they always knew when someone had passed away because Bill would be at the petrol station filling it up and whistling. Now the two women have brought local care back to the final rite of passage in the Bay. Stuff.